Hey, what's up? Steve here. Welcome back to Sharpen. Today I want to talk to you about some technique. And in this case, what I wanted to do was find a way to infinitely adjust my lighting however I see fit for whatever scenario that I want. Now that sounds like a whole lot, and it kind of is, and it's a little over the top. I get it, it's dramatic. But let's be dramatic. This is YouTube after all, right? I definitely am a fan of discovering new ways to capture something and showcase something. In this case, a product. I've been using this technique in stills work. I wanted to carry it over to video work to see how applicable it was. So I captured some stuff in the studio, recorded some content there. We're gonna cut to that, then we're gonna cut back to this, and I'm gonna show you some of that post-production process. Hey, what's up? So today we're in the studio, we're shooting some product. But what you might also notice are all of these lights. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lights. Now in this case, some of them are lighting a blue screen in the background. Some of them are just lighting the product itself. But you might also still be saying, why do you need so many lights? I could do this with 2 lights or 3 lights. Yes, you totally could. But what I plan to do is actually turn on and off all of these lights one at a time, as well as having them all on while the product is spinning in 360. What I'll plan to do then is key it out from the background, and then it will give me the ability to blend in and out each one of those individual lights to get a little bit more of a dynamic edit overall, and I can just get more control. So this is just an experimentation, messing around in studio. We'll find out what we get. Come along for the ride. So we're shooting on the R5. I've got a 90mm tilt shift, and I'm recording to an Atomos. One of the other things I really want to be conscious of when I'm recording is where my starting point is to make sure that I'm starting on each of the same sides. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start here with this open face. It's just gonna make aligning all of that stuff a lot easier in post. A process like this definitely takes time, arguably overkill, and not necessarily for a massive amount of products, but if you have one hero shot and you wanna have a lot of control and a lot of flexibility, this should work really well. And I'll tell you what, the turntable I'm using is a cheap Amazon turntable. This thing has been a champion. The motor in this is super consistent. I put 50 pounds on this thing. I was shooting a really large product. I even laid out some wood to kind of extend the area so that way the weight would be a little bit more evenly distributed, and it handled it like a champ. It says it can hold up to 81 pounds, and I believe it. Just to kind of walk through the lights that I'm using. Majority of them are aperture lights, but some are also Amaran. So we've got the Aperture Nova P300. That is functioning as my key light. I've also got a grid on there, so that way it just controls a little bit of the spill. Above, I've got the Amaran FC22, I believe it is. And this guy is, what a fantastic light that is. If you shoot any kind of video, that is definitely a light that you want to have in your kit. It's just so versatile, it's flat, it's portable, it's powerful, it's colorful, like it's all the things that you would want. And then the big guy that I'm actually using to light the background is an Aperture 600X. Having a light like that in studio or in your kit is one of those lights that you will pull out constantly. So in this case, big soft light onto my background so that way my key is gonna be nice and even. The back rim light, I've got the Amaran 150C. They've got the 300s out now, which are also really good, super powerful, but the 150 is really nice, tried and true, good to have in the kit. Last but not least, I've actually got on the snoot, I've got a Clar, which is Clar? Oh, last but not least, the little guy that I'm using actually has sort of this underlit fill is a Viltrox, tiny little cheap, just using that for a little bit of bottom fill. But we've got all our takes, we've got everything. Now we're just gonna go into Final Cut and start putting it together. And we're back. All right, well, I hope you like what Steve from the studio was talking about, because I think it's so important to understand the how. So we're here in Final Cut, and this is the shot that I'm working with. Like I mentioned, I've been shooting a lot more pickleball content, so that's what I'm utilizing here. The idea is that I have this shot, and I shot something in slow motion. This was just shot on my phone, right? Where I'm tossing up the paddle and it's kind of doing the spin. Let me just play this back for you in real time here. And you can see it stops, because at this point in time is where I want to now take the paddle that I captured in studio and bring it into this environment. I wanted to have versatility with this product shoot. So the idea of putting it on a 360 turntable, spinning it around. Now in this case, I intentionally made a shot where I was spinning the paddle with my hand, because now I know I want to cut to that and get that paddle from the studio to match the paddle here. Use case number 1 of this technique is that I can basically adjust the exposure from all the angles that I had to match as closely as possible live action shot like this. And then in this same clip, I'm gonna show you the use case number 2, so stick around for that. Here what we've done is I just started, spins it up, and then it stops. Well, this is the point where what I'm gonna do is actually use a mask. All I did here was I just scrubbed forward to a frame where you can see I was holding the paddle lower so it wasn't in the sky, and I just extracted that as a still image and then masked it out. So now I've got a nice clean backplate for my sky. So this paddle that you're seeing right now is actually the paddle that was shot in the studio. Let me zoom in a little bit closer here, but that was the paddle from the studio. So here I can just kind of turn that on and off. And what I'm doing here is I'm utilizing compound clips. So essentially think of it like a group. And inside of there is where I actually lined everything up. So let me show you what that looks like. And you can see them there in my browser. I can scrub through those, but here inside of this compound clip, which I've titled Paddle Layers, are each one of the individual lights. So in this case, I've titled them Rim, Spotlight, Key Light, Overhead, and Fill. One of the things that I called out in the studio was making sure you had overlap in your starting and stopping points to make sure that it would be a little bit easier in this case to line things up. And it definitely took a little bit of time, so patience is definitely needed, but I got everything lined up and it all looks pretty rock solid. So the technique here, the way that it works is you take all of your layers, and to get the lighting to all interact together, you would set your blend mode to lighten or potentially screen. To get the most realistic result, lighten is giving me that. Now what I'll be able to do is just toggle these on and off, and you'll see some of the effect that they have. Rim light, super dramatic. Spotlight, not so much. Key light, overhead, and fill. Now, notice when I select the spotlight layer that I actually have not only a blend mode set, but I have the opacity dropped all the way down. If I scrub back over to this angle right here and toggle that on and off, you can see very minimal, but if I crank this opacity up, right now we're at an opacity of 8. If I crank this all the way up, you can see that it's actually adding this nice strong glow to the front of the paddle. And what I've done in this case is I've actually keyframed in opacity shifts. So over time, you can see as I scrub forward, I'm increasing the opacity because I want there to be more of a dramatic effect. All the way up here, I have this adjustment layer turned off, and this essentially was my cheat sheet because Final Cut is not really great at compositing. I mean, it's fine and it works well, but what I found myself having trouble with was going back and forth from the live action scene where the compound clip was keyed out into making adjustments here with all of my layers. So the cheat that I did was I added an adjustment layer with time code on it. Where that's become really helpful is, say I needed to scrub forward in a point in time where the paddle was at this angle here, well, I could look at my time code, I could go back to the live action shot, and now you can see as I scrub forward, I can match exactly where I need that to be. So by the time the paddle turns around, I know whether or not I need to turn layers on or off, again, to get them to match with the live action shot. Now what I will do is go back to full screen and let me just play back this moment here, just so you can see it blended in with the actual shot. The things that I wanted to kind of help sell in this effect a little bit more were, first and foremost, a little bit of color, but also I'm going to use MCamRig from Motion VFX. And this is such an awesome, simple tool, and it's free, by the way. So definitely go ahead and check out MCamRig. When I turn that on, you can see what it does is it allows me to do a zoom in on that moment, hold it there, and then allow me to zoom out. So I'll play that back for you. One of the things you might have noticed is that there's a little bit of blur that happens, right? It almost as if, you know, you dollied the camera forward and then someone had to kind of rack focus, right? That's sort of the simulation that's happening there. What's also happening is that gap where this is the real paddle and then here's the fake paddle. So what I did was intentionally matched an angle where I'd be able to hide that cut a little bit easier, but with this blur, it hides it even more. So you really wouldn't be able to tell where the real paddle and now the fake paddle are. The lighting here, I was able to dial that in, whether it's adding a little bit more rim light or the spotlight or turning some of that off to get it to match this scenario. Being able to have 5 layers to work with gave me a ton of flexibility to get it to look fairly realistic. Cool, so that's what I did in this case. In the studio, we shot all those different angles, we got everything lined up here in Final Cut, put it into a compound clip, took that compound clip, put it into a timeline here, scaled it down, adjusted the angle, and then started working on the compositing by adding on a green screen. There's before, there's after with just keying it out. I just used the simple green screen keyer. And then what I would do is I went through, made the adjustments to those layers. Worked out pretty well. The other use case was when I just wanted to add in a little bit of color. So let me show you what that looks like here. Notice that now I have a really strong red rim light happening here on the paddle. And you can see it kind of fades in a little bit. So let's take a look at that. Specifically the overhead, when I turn that on and off, you can see what I've done is I've added a colorize. And essentially I just wanted to black out the shadows and then add a little bit of red, or a lot of red in this case, to the highlights. And I also did the same thing on the rim light. Spotlight here, you can see what I've done is I actually have a couple of keyframes fading that in. So it's kind of given a little bit more of that dramatic effect where it kind of ramps up like a light is kind of being thrown onto it. And the last thing here that I want to call out is that on the key light, I actually went ahead and added on a mask so that way the light is really only hitting the handles as I turn that on and off. It was getting too bright combined with the spotlight. So again, lots of control here. So all in all, I would say that studio experiment, totally worth it. Now I know that I can apply that same technique from stills into video in some specific and select use cases. But if a scenario ever comes up where I don't know how the lighting is going to look when I need to composite later, this is a technique that now it seems as though I can utilize. Or if I want to just get creative with some specialty effects, we can use this too. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about my sort of experimental process here. Let me know if this kind of approach is something that you're interested in. I know that typically what we do is we talk about gear reviews, but in this case, what I wanted to do was sprinkle in just a little bit of technique because I really love talking about this stuff and I really love exploring technique. Let me know if this is a technique that you think you would ever possibly use. Hit the bell, hit subscribe if you want to see more product videos or some experimental and practical technique videos like these. And until then, I'll see you on the courts. Just kidding, we probably aren't gonna play pickleball together. But if you're in the New England area, specifically Connecticut, and you wanna go play pickleball, let me know, because I'll definitely play pickleball. I'm not gonna stop talking about it either. Like I'm into it, like super into it. Super into it.